Iran's President Ebrahim Raisi and Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdullahian died on Sunday, 19th of May, in a terrible helicopter crash in northwestern Iran. The president was coming back from Azerbaijan after inaugurating a dam project being jointly developed between Iran and Azerbaijan. 9 officials died in that tragic accident, including the Imam of Tabriz. Given Iran's ongoing tensions with Israel, unending war in Gaza, Israel's destruction of Iranian consulate in Damascus, and Iran's counterattack with more than 300 missiles into Israel in April, and Israeli hints of series of strikes inside Iran, fingers were immediately pointed towards Israel and its powerful intelligence agency, Mossad. But others suspected power tussles inside Tehran. Ebrahim Raisi was considered to be the second most powerful man in Iran's clerical establishment, after the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. Before becoming president in 2021, he had also served as head of Iran's judiciary. And given his influence inside the religious lobbies and his proximity to supreme leader, he was being tipped as successor to Ayatollah Khamenei. But then, Imam Mujtaba Khamenei, second son of Ayatollah, is also reportedly a contender for the most powerful position in the country. And Mujtaba, a religious scholar in the city of Qum, is apparently close to Iranian Revolutionary Guards, most important force in present Iran's political architecture. So what really happened? And how this sudden exit of Iran's president and foreign minister from the scene is going to change Iran's politics and foreign policy? To make sense of this, Moeed Pirzada is joined with Alex Vatanka, Senior Fellow and Founding Director of Iran Program at Middle East Institute in Washington. Alex Vatanka specializes in Iran's domestic politics and its regional and international relations. He was born in Tehran and grew up in Denmark and across Europe. His recent book, Battle of Ayatollahs in Iran, is a substantive addition to understanding internal dynamics of most powerful nation in the Middle East. His earlier book, Iran and Pakistan, Security, Diplomacy and American Influence, has been read across India and Pakistan. Before you move ahead to this insightful discussion, let me remind you to join this channel and click bell icon for notifications, because your subscription will help to grow an intelligent community for informed, rational discourse on global issues, and will enable us to reach out to influential scholars and opinion makers across the world.
Is this an act of God or is this an act of politics?
Look, I have no way of knowing, Moeed, what happened. Obviously, you have the basic facts. This is almost a half a century old helicopter flying in most mountainous parts of northwestern Iran in thick fog. The Israelis have a long track record of operating inside of Iran. They have agents, they have a network, thousands of technocrats that are still part of this regime. It's not a regime that has the majority of Iranians on its side, but it's got plenty of people still in its rank. The idea that Raisi is dead and therefore there will be no other successor to Khamenei, that's far-fetched. The case that needs to be resolved is, did Ebrahim Raisi die in that helicopter crash because of malfunction as part of a power struggle that's happening in Tehran right now?
Assalamu alaikum, this is Moeed Pirzada. As all of you know, after the recent sad demise of Iran's President Ebrahim Raisi in an accident, which many suspect is perhaps not necessarily an act of God, all eyes are focused on Iran's internal politics and on the question that how this sudden departure of Iran's president and its foreign minister is going to affect Iran's domestic politics and its relationship with Israel, Middle East, United States, and the West. Joining me in this discussion is Alex Vatanka. Alex Vatanka is a senior fellow and a founding director of the Iran Program in Middle East Institute. He specializes in Iran's domestic politics and international relations. He was born in Tehran, raised across Europe and Denmark. His name, Vatanka, is probably, as is described, as Vatanka. I would also like to understand from him more about it. Alex, thank you. I'm so grateful for your joining me. And let me also add that, your recent book is actually about the Battle of Ayatollahs in Iran. And your earlier book, Iran and Pakistan, Security, Diplomacy, and U.S. Influence. So once again, very warm welcome to you for joining me.
Thank you, Moeed. It's a pleasure to be with you, and thank you for that kind introduction. I very much look forward to spending the next few minutes with you and discussing the latest events.
So, do you recognize this book in my hands?
I do. That was my first book. The first book I ever wrote was on Iran and Pakistan relations, which in fact gave me the opportunity to visit the beautiful country of Pakistan for the first time about a decade ago, where I was hosted from Islamabad to Lahore, elsewhere. Beautiful country. I had good memories, and I forever grateful to those many wonderful.
Thank you, Alex. And it's very interesting that, you should know this thing, that your book has been selling in Pakistan. It's a number of years ago. So
Right.
I got all my books shipped from Pakistan, and I bought this book from you in a Pakistani bookstore called Mr. Books in Islamabad, F6 Market, right? So, I mean, you are read over there. There were a number of copies over there.
Thank you.
Coming straight, I understand that you have a meeting immediately after about 20 minutes. President Ebrahim Raisi's, there are a lot of theories about it. What is the sum total of your understanding within Middle East Institute at the moment? I mean, you and your team are continuously looking at the Iranian politics and regional situation. Is this an act of God, or is this an act of politics?
Look, I have no way of knowing, Moeed, what happened. Obviously, you have the basic facts. This is almost a half a century old helicopter flying in most mountainous parts of northwestern Iran in thick fog. So, it could really well be that this was an accident. But I can tell you, Moeed, that that's not what a lot of Iranians think right now. There's just too convenient for some political rivals of Ebrahim Raisi for this to happen to him right now. There are even folks inside of Iran. In fact, a lot of Iranians were kind of pointing the finger at even the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, saying perhaps he had a hand in this because Raisi was one potential successor. The other major name being mentioned in recent years is Mujtaba Khamenei, Khamenei's son. So, there's all sorts of speculation here in terms of what happened, but the politics of it, it's too early to say where we're going, but Raisi's death certainly will have an impact on the succession process.
So let me intervene. So from what you have said, I assume that within Iran, the speculations and the suspicions are more towards the internal power struggle within Iran, in internal Iranian politics, and not towards Israel.
No, I mean, you would suspect that the Iranian regime would point a finger at the likes of the United States and Israel. In fact, that was preempted by Secretary of Defense in this country, in Washington, Secretary Austin, who said the United States had nothing to do with it. So the reason he came out and said it publicly and so early is because he knew those kinds of accusations would be coming their way. But no, look, most of the Iranian regime media are staying away from pointing the finger at anybody. They're sticking to the official story that this was a malfunction of the helicopter.
Interestingly, because I was when I first heard of it, within the first few minutes, my first hunch was that Israel may have something to do with it, because when the Iranians fired 300 plus missiles and rockets, projectiles on Israel, I was continuously reading the situation, and one of the article, New York Times had in-depth coverage talking to the Israeli officials. And one particular comment struck my mind, that was this, that Israel's response will not be one big bang, but will take in the form of several series of blows against Iran, So Israeli officials basically confided with New York Times at the time. So I thought maybe it's part of the strategy. But you're right, no one in Iran is definitely pointing a finger towards Israel at the moment.
Not at the moment, and it would be a huge embarrassment for them if they would come out and openly admit to it. Look, on the issue of Israel, there are a couple of factors here, but the main ones are the following. Yes, the Israelis have a long track record of operating inside of Iran. They have agents, they have a network. They can take off and use drones that they assemble in Iran for operations in Iran. That's how extensive it is.
Seriously, they assemble drones inside Iran for operations in Iran.
That's right. They smuggle it in, and they have been doing that based on reports from Iranian side and from the Israeli side. But the other thing you have to ask, Moeed, is this. Yes, you kill the Iranian president, you get a big bang headline. It's a psychological impact. But what does it actually mean for Israel in terms of what Iran does against Israel? Was Raisi the main decision maker? And the answer to that is no. The Iranian policy towards Israel is not going to change because Raisi and Amir Abdullahian are dead. Those policies were created and implemented years before he became president. So for that reason, I have my questions like, if it was Israel, and a huge if, this is what everybody's speculating, But if that was the sort of thing Israel would do, to what end, other than, as I said, as a psychological blow to their
embarrassment, destabilization, stress for Iran, humiliation?
No, I mean, you don't have to be an Iran watcher that studies the country every day the way I do to know that Raisi's death is not going to destabilize the Islamic Republic. He wasn't a political heavyweight. He was president just because Khamenei gave it to him. He doesn't have a base inside the regime that's that strong. He certainly doesn't have a base in Iranian society. This man was a technocrat who was lifted out of obscurity about 10 years ago, and by 2021, he was made president, because Khamenei wanted him to become president and do as he told him to, and he's exactly what Raisi did. So Raisi's death is not going to shake the Islamic Republic up.
So, Alex, if he was that unimportant, I mean, as president of Iran in 2021, so is this then suggesting this thing that Iran's elections are basically a sham exercise? I mean, you mean you just said that he had no influence in Iranian society, had no real political bubble over there?
On key issues, Moeed, on key issues like Iran's relations with the United States, Iran's position on Israel, Iran's activities in the region, Iran's nuclear program, Iran's missile program, none of these issues are ones that the president has a final say or the most dominant say. So the Supreme Leader's office, the man Ali Khamenei, the Supreme Leader, and the Revolutionary Guards are the most dominant actors. And obviously, they haven't been impacted by this helicopter crash. They're still in power. And for that reason, I suspect more policy continuity in the next few weeks and months going forward.
So you hinted towards the battle of succession. So what is the sum total effect of the sudden departure and exit of the president and the foreign minister on Iran's internal politics?
So in the immediate future, no major impact. I mean, he was on the short list, and there are some reports. Reuters is reporting this week that he had actually been removed from that short list 6 months ago because of his unpopularity. I have no way of knowing if that's true, although I was actually quoted in that Reuters
I
report.
read that.
Yeah, so no, all I can tell you is this. The Islamic Republic has about 10-15% of the Iranian population's support. And there are thousands of technocrats that are still part of this regime. It's not a regime that has the majority of Iranians on its side, but it's got plenty of people still in its ranks. So the idea that Raisi is dead and therefore there will be no other successor to Khamenei, that's far-fetched. They can find somebody. They will find somebody if they decide to have another supreme leader. But again, we also have to remember, Khamenei's 85, but he's not in bad health. He's not sick as far as I can tell.
Two questions flow out from it. So was the succession inevitable? For the succession to take place, Khamenei has to die or retire, or the succession has to take place because the Council of the Experts, the Committee of the Experts of 88 people basically decide that Khamenei should go. He's sitting there for 36 years.
Yeah. So on paper, the Assembly of Experts have the power to fire him, but in reality, they're not going to do that because they've all ended up in that Majlis, in that parliament, because they were approved by Khamenei to go there in the first place. So for that reason, they're not going to vote against the man who put him in charge of that decision. On paper, they can do all sorts of things. The reality is about power, and who has the ultimate power today is Khamenei and the Revolutionary Guards. And Khamenei could tomorrow say, you know what, I'm old. We've seen that in recent years with the previous pope who said, I'm too old, I can't make this happen anymore, and I'll retire. But Khamenei is not that man. Khamenei is not going to retire. He will fight to the very last. And the question is, what is he going to fight for? That remains to be seen.
But Alex, I mean, most of my viewers are Pakistanis. I mean, there are Indians as well, the people in the US as well. So are you then suggesting that the real chief executive of Iran for all these years is Khamenei, is the supreme leader? I mean, the president, the prime minister, and everything is just a showpiece? What is that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's been true for the last, I mean, if you look at the totality of the length of the Islamic Republic, 45 years, I would say certainly since the mid-1990s, the supreme leader has been the dominant voice. And on key issues, certainly. I mean, there are some issues that the supreme leader doesn't care about. Some minor economic planning, he doesn't get involved in that. But on sensitive issues, he has not led a single president. Let me take the issue, Moeed, of the United States. Hassan Rouhani, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, Hashemi Rafsanjani, all these previous presidents, when they tried to go in a different direction, even explore the idea of opening up to the United States, Khamenei would say, not over my head, you're not. Because to him, the issue of the United States is about his political survival. And that tells you where he is politically in terms of his location. He is at the top of the pyramid.
No, but why his political survival is linked to the relationship with the US?
He thinks if there is liberalization, political liberalization in Iran, that the Americans will find a way in, that the Americans love the idea of reopening that American embassy in downtown Tehran, and that the Americans would use that embassy to create new political conditions in Iran, because Khamenei thinks he's lost his own people, that the Iranian public is by and large pro-American, and that Americans will use that reality against him, and doing so will be the end of his political, if you will, power. And that's why he is so against, and he's so willing to pay such a high price of maintaining enmity to the United States. For him, it's not a foreign policy issue. It's about his political survival at home.
I just heard something very shocking. You said that the Iranian public is by and large pro-American. Is this true?
Yeah. Oh, I believe that genuinely. And I don't think necessarily because the United States has done anything good for the Iranian people as such, other than being an open country where hundreds of thousands of Iranians in the last 45 years have come to the United States, made this country into their home, and are a largely very successful immigrant community.
How large is the Iranian diaspora between East and West Coast?
The numbers are hard because it depends how you identify, but the number is between the 1 to 2 million range, but it's definitely over 1 million at this point.
And is this an affluent community?
By and large, they are educated, affluent, and they culturally stick to the nuclear family. They are typical for first-generation immigrants in that sense that they create the wealth. The first generation, that's where we're at right now. The first-generation Americans are pretty affluent.
I'm also looking at the time, so you have to leave. I know this thing. So very quick questions. So was this always like this, that the Iranian population was like not happy with the regime, or it has happened in the last 10, 15 years?
Look, it's been a gradual journey for the regime. The regime has known for years that there is anger in Iranian society, both in terms of domestic policies, what Iran is doing in the region. Let's take this fight with Iran and Israel. The Iranian people, frankly, don't care about what happens between Israel and the Palestinians. I say Iranian people, I mean, vast majority of them, in my estimation, don't care. This is not the thing that keeps them up at night. They care about all the problems they have at home in Iran today. And yet the regime will tell you that the Palestinian issue and the conflict with Israel is the only one thing in this world that matters. That's just one example of how the regime and the people are on two different planets.
Why the regime basically airs the Palestinian issue if the public is not necessarily in sync with that? What's the point?
Ali Khamenei lost the Iranian people a long time ago. So instead of trying to make amends with the people in Iran, he's looking for new audiences, and primarily in the Islamic world. So he's looking at countries like Pakistan, the Muslims of India, elsewhere, to say, look, I'm a great Muslim leader. And what do you need to be a great Muslim leader? You have to speak loudly about the Palestinians. So that's his game plan.
So how the relationship, was this departure affect any relationship with Saudi Arabia? There's a recent thaw with Saudi Arabia via China. Is this going to affect anything? What is that?
I doubt it, because Raisi was not the person who essentially set foreign policy agenda. He traveled widely. He would go. He was received. He was a voice as president because the president sits in fact, oversees one important body in Iran called the Supreme National Security Council. So in terms of formalities, he was up there. He was, at some point, you could argue on paper, he was more powerful, the supreme leader. But my point is, Moeed, in reality, in actual position of power, Raisi was an implementer of the wishes of the people who put him in the presidency in the first place. And he never in his life stood up to them. And he knew if he did, that would be the sort of end of his career.
So if he was so loyal to the supreme leader, why the suspicions that he could be removed because of the succession battle where Mujtaba Khamenei is in the line? Why?
You know, Moeed, better than me, countries where you don't have free press, conspiracy theories are oftentimes the only way you can sort of try and make sense of things. And Iran certainly doesn't have free press. And people are very suspicious of not just in this incident. You can go back to the death of the son of Khomeini, right, in, I think it was 94, or the death of Rafsanjani in 2017. There have been some pretty mysterious deaths in the Islamic Republic, and we still to this day don't know what happened. So this raises the question. This is not a regime that people think is benevolent. This is a regime that is happily able to and does kill opponents. And in fact, killings happen as part of infighting within the regime too. The case that needs to be resolved is, Did Ebrahim Raisi die in that helicopter crash because of malfunction as part of a power struggle that's happening in Tehran right now?
What about Mustafa Khamenei? I mean, he has the chance to become supreme leader. He's only 55.
He has a chance because his father is the most powerful person, essentially, and he has close ties to a part, not all, but a part of the Revolutionary Guard system. And he's a man who has been basically living among intelligence agencies and security services. And if a decision is made by them that he is their preferred successor to his father, then it's going to be hard to see how the Iranian people can avoid it unless they decide enough is enough and they come out and you have
Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps can also play a role in the battle of succession.
It's going to be one of the most, if not the most important player. The Revolutionary Guards today are a state within a state. They are the ones that really call the shots on some of the key issues.
Are they more powerful than the Iranian military?
Oh, absolutely they are, because they have political power. The Iranian military doesn't have, the Artesh doesn't have political power, doesn't have an intelligence branch. The Revolutionary Guards have all those things, and they have economic power too.
Yeah, it's 1:24. Just one last set of questions. You wrote about the book, your first book was about Pakistan. What happened between Iran and Pakistan was unexpected, unprecedented. Iranians making missile strikes in Pakistan in 77 years that had not happened. Pakistan is striking back. What are your thoughts on that?
Look, as in my book, Iran, Pakistan, as I lay out, there's a lot of friendship, there are a lot of proximities in different ways that you can measure. But in fact, there's also been a lot of frustration. This is one question of managing expectations. Pakistan has looked to Iran to be on its side fully, unconditionally against India. And the Iranians haven't always looked at it that way. They consider India as a rising power, and that goes back to the Shah. On the Iranian side, they consider Pakistan's close ties to the Gulf states, to the United States, as a bit of a betrayal. So what happened in recent months with the attack that happened on Iran, on Pakistan, and then Pakistan on Iran, was kind of an expression of those frustrations. Look, the greater Baluchistan has all sorts of issues, and we have to hope that Iran and Pakistan can really genuinely come up with a meaningful way of dealing with instability on both sides of the border in their respective Baluchistan provinces, because if it doesn't get fixed, you will continue to have tensions in that region, which will continue to deprive two large countries from the sort of economic and political cooperation that could be beneficial to both of them if they let it happen and take natural course.
Alex, thank you so much for this wonderful discourse, and I look forward to staying in touch with you on these issues. Thank you so much.
Pleasure to see you, mate. Thank you for having me.